Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Adrian. Today we are doing a quarterly report. This is my quarter 2 for 2021. So we're going to be looking at all the books I read from the beginning of April all the way through to the end of June. So yeah, I have got a video like this for quarter 1 in 2021 if you have a look below. But right now let's jump into everything I've read and some of my favourites and maybe some of my least favourites from this quarter. So first up, right at the beginning of April, I started off my first ever Adrian Tchaikovsky read, and this was Children of Time. Children of Time is a first contact novel of sorts. You are following a remnant of the human race, and you are following a species of sentient, genetically modified spider, essentially. These are the two main perspectives we get. Very interesting, really enjoyed it. It's definitely more on the hard sci-fi end of things, but a great read, and yeah, really good book to get into if you like your harder sci-fi. Next up, we read a new release. This was The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. This was one of probably my most anticipated book of 2021. It did not fail to deliver, thankfully. In this, it is a Norse fantasy setting. We're in a world that follows on a few hundred years after the death of the gods, and we are following three main protagonists. Orca, a mum who is fighting for her family. We have Varg, who is a slave who is fighting for freedom and to learn what happened to his sister. And we are following Elvar, who is a warrior who is part of a battle company, and she is seeking glory for herself and for her family. Great book, great place to jump into John Gwynne if you've never read any John Gwynne before. Highly recommend you get it and have a read of it. It was brilliant. Next up, I read Morning Star by Pierce Brown. This is book 3 of the Red Rising trilogy. I did enjoy this book. It was good. Pierce Brown pulls a sort of an authorial technique at the end of this book that I did not like. He broke the rules. He did not play fair. Unfortunately, that did mar my otherwise high opinion of this book. Otherwise it would have definitely been, and it probably still was, the best book in this opening trilogy for me personally. But yes, there we go. That's what I thought of that one. So at this point in April, I started with a few series that I've managed to start and complete by this point in June, or now July. So the first one of these that I really jumped into was The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. I started reading Traitor's Blade about halfway through April, and I finished Tyrant's Throne by the end of April, which is pretty good going for me. That's a 4-book series knocked out in 13 days. So yeah, that is you can tell by the speed I read that how much I enjoyed this series. Greatcoats has slotted into my top 10 fantasy series of all time. I really enjoy it. Traitor's Blade definitely feels like a bit of a prelude, a bit of a prologue, but then from there the books just take off and are absolutely wonderful. Highly recommend this series. In it we are following 3 Greatcoats. So the Greatcoats are an order set up by the now dead king, who are basically travelling magistrates. They are judges who pronounce judgments on people across the land, bringing the king's justice and singing the verdicts so the common man knows what happens, because that's how things get passed down through generations, and through sort of to the common man is through spoken word and sung word. So they sing their verdicts. This is a great series. I love the 3 main characters. We follow Falkio, Kest and Brasti, and they are wonderful, along with a great cast of side characters as well. I would absolutely recommend jumping into this series. Now, in between these, I did pick up my second Terry Pratchett book ever. That was Reaper Man, which is the second book in the Death sub-series. I had read Mort as my first ever Discworld book back in the first quarter this year. I did really enjoy Reaper Man quite a bit more, thankfully. Yeah, Death is a very interesting character. I much preferred the wacky, not side plot, but the sort of other plot that was going on as well. I thought was better executed as well, and I can definitely see myself continuing on in Discworld. I'm just trying to consider whether I read Soul Man next, which is the next Death sub-series, or whether I jump over to the City Watch sub-series, which I know gets so much love. I've heard so much about Guards that I almost feel like I need to jump over to that side next. And then right at the end of April, I picked up a book by an author I've not read before. This is Marie Brennan, and this was A Natural History of Dragons. This is the first book in the memoirs of Lady Trent. In this book, we are following Lady Trent as she becomes and longs to become and starts to become basically a real physiologist of dragons. She is researching them. She's trying to understand how they work, the biological setup and makeup of them, and their habitats, the ecology, all that kind of stuff. It is very much sort of a research book, but it's very much a quest and adventure. It's a very interesting setting, much more, not modern day, but much more like almost gaslight fantasy, rather than your classic sort of a lot earlier setting that we often get in our fantasy worlds. I did enjoy this book. It wasn't an absolute home run for me, but it was good enough. I enjoyed it. I will definitely be continuing the series. So yeah, interested to see where that one goes. Moving into May, I picked up my second ever book by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is a novella called Firewalkers. It was a very quick read, set in sort of a post-apocalyptic Earth. It is a snappy novella. It keeps moving. It addresses some interesting ideas. Yeah, really nice place to jump in if you want a quicker read to get you engaged with Tchaikovsky's books. Next up was Mexican Gothic. This is a Gothic, I always want to say horror, not really Gothic horror, more Gothic thriller with some fantastical elements. This is by Silvia Moreno Garcia. Unfortunately for me, it didn't quite stick the landing as I'd have wanted it to, but was still an enjoyable read. And yes, if you're looking for your Gothic fix, this might be a book for you to get into. The next series I started in this quarter that I have not yet got to the end of, and this is the Emperor series by Connor Gordon. This is Roman historical fiction. It is set around the time of Julius Caesar. I've read the first two books in this, so that's Emperor The Gates of Rome and Emperor The Death of Kings, both very enjoyable. I'm looking to jump into Field of Swords, which I believe is the third one, coming soon this month in July, but really enjoyed it as my first real dipping my toe into historical fiction. This is a good place to start, and if you like the Romans, if you like that period of history, maybe a place for you to jump into historical fiction as well. Now again, we're going to be starting to see a theme here. I also then jumped into another Adrian Tchaikovsky book. This one is Guns of the Dawn. So whereas the other two I've read so far in this quarter were sci-fi, proper hard sci-fi, sort of post-apocalyptic, almost dystopian for Firewalkers, whereas this here, Guns of the Dawn, is very much classical fantasy. If you cross Jane Austen with a sort of fantasy war novel, that's kind of what you're getting here. Very good book, highly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the sort of Jane Austen-ish elements more than I thought I would, and I just think it was a very good exploration of war and all that comes along with that. So yeah, another hit for me on the Tchaikovsky count. Before I get to what was probably my favourite set of reads from this quarter, we're going to knock off some of the other things I've read this month. So some rereads for me. I have started re-listening to the Dresden Files, which is a proper comfort read for me. I love the Dresden Files, so I listened to Stormfront and Full Moon. Currently, as of time of recording, I am also listening to Grave Peril. These are great books. Full Moon is the weakest book in Dresden Files, as everyone will say, and it's still a good book. I still love it, I still enjoy it. It's not up to the standard of the rest of the series, but that's a very high standard to expect. As well as that, I've started a couple of new series. So I started the Cradle series by Will White. I read Unsold this month, which was a solid 4-star read for me. Enjoyed it, very much felt like an introduction to the world, an introduction to our main character. I can see there are being a lot of room for growth here. I can see this expanding massively over the coming books, and I look forward to following on with that journey. I also started another self-published fantasy series. This is by Raymond St. Elmo. It is called The Quest of the Five Clans. First book is The Blood Tartan. This verged on, as far as I can tell, magical realism. Not that I've read any of that before, but a very interesting look at sort of a dark subculture hidden in our real world, not set in this era, very much set back in sort of Napoleonic times, I believe. But the writing style, the prose, is really what is going to win out for this one. Very interesting prose, enjoyed it a lot. It was a quick read and definitely enjoyable. Last book to get to before I want to talk about my final series I read is The Hound of the Baskervilles by G.S. Denning. This is book 2 in the Warlock Holmes series. Just like book 1, A Study in Brimstone, it is a collection of short stories and a novella as well. For me, the short stories here were a real strength. Really enjoyed it. It is comedic, a bit absurd, highly ridiculous, but a really fun series. If you want a fast-paced, enjoyable, pick-me-up read, I would recommend getting into this series. Now for me, we've been saving the best for last. This trilogy, the series that I have read, I only started sort of halfway through June, maybe just at the start of June. Yeah, 9th of June I started it, and I got through the entire trilogy by the end of the month. They're not short books, but they are brilliant, and that is the Winnowing Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. So it starts with the 9th Reign. You've probably seen me talk about this on the channel. I really adore this series. I am a little conflicted about how it ended still, but not in a I think this was done poorly, just in a I was so invested with the characters. I wanted something to happen and something else happened, which is a good way to be conflicted, if you see what I'm saying. I think book 2 was a slight step down. It just felt like the foot eased off the gas a little bit. It felt a little bit side questy, but all in all, this is a great world. It is a world that I felt very immersed in. The characters that we follow, I felt like I knew. I felt like they were my friends and I loved them, and I didn't want to say goodbye to this world. For me, this is the best series I have read this quarter, which tells you something when I read the whole of the Great Quotes this quarter. So that tells you something about how I'm feeling about this series so far. Do keep your eyes out on the channel for a Should I Read the Winnowing Flame trilogy. I will try to give you some pros and some cons. It might be hard for me to find some cons for you, but I will try my best to work out what other people might struggle with, so you can work out if this is a series you want to jump into. So that's definitely my highlight for this quarter, and the Winnowing Flame trilogy, closely followed by the Greatcoats. I hope you found that interesting. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will hopefully see you guys again soon.